FAIRIES, A True Story by Shirley Raye Redmond. Illustrated by Red Hansen. Do you believe in fairies? People around the world have told stories about fairies for a long time. In some stories, fairies come out to dance when the moon is full. Sometimes they steal babies from their cradles. They leave fairy children in their place. In Ireland, fairies are called the wee folk. In parts of Africa, there are kind fairies called assizas. The brownies of England and Scotland are helpful. They run errands and clean stables. But not all fairies are friendly. Britain's ugly spriggans bring bad weather to ruin crops. And the Lasci or Slavic forest fairies beat people with sticks and tree limbs. Cautious travelers carried dry bread in their pockets to protect themselves from fairy mischief. More than 2 centuries ago, brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm spent many years collecting German fairy tales. Their book, Children's and Household Tales, was published in 1812. It became popular around the world. But are fairies real? Today, most people say no. Some folklore researchers, though, say maybe. They say that a long time ago in Great Britain, there may have been a group of small people. They may have been conquered by tall invaders. To avoid capture, these small people hid in the forest. They wore green clothes so they would be hard to spot. They came out only at night to hunt and steal food. Sometimes they even switched their sick babies for healthy ones. Over time, these small people died off, but their neighbors still told tales about them. There are others who say fairies are real. They insist they have seen them. In 1842, in Stowmarket, England, a man saw a dozen fairies dancing in the moonlight. He ran home and told his neighbors. They rushed back to the meadow. But when they got there, the fairies had disappeared. William Blake was a famous British poet. He claimed to have seen a fairy funeral. He told his friends the fairies were as small as grasshoppers. They carried a dead fairy on a rose petal. They sang a sad song as they passed him in the garden. Did this man really see fairies? Maybe, maybe not. People sometimes make up stories to explain things they don't understand. Weather can play tricks on our eyes. Fairies dancing in a meadow might be nothing more than fireflies or snowflakes. Some people who think they have seen fairies have been tricked. The most famous fairy prank took place in Cottingley, England. One afternoon in July 1917, 2 cousins named Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths drew some pretty fairy pictures. They cut them out like paper dolls. Elsie took a photo of Frances talking to the fairies. Frances took a photo of fairies dancing in Elsie's lap. Elsie's father, Mr. Wright, developed the photos. At first, he was puzzled. He thought the blurry images were birds or empty bags. Elsie told him that she and Frances had found fairies in the woods. 3 years later, Elsie's mother met a man named Edward Gardner. He was a well-known teacher of fairy folklore. Mrs. Wright told him that her daughter had taken photos of fairies. Mr. Gardner showed the photos to men at the Kodak Camera Lab in London. One man said the pictures were fake, but another man noticed a blur in a photo. He said that meant the fairy was moving. He said the photos were real. Mr. Gardner was delighted. He told everyone he knew that fairies lived in Cottingley Woods. He asked the girls to take more fairy photos. They agreed. They sent 3 more photos to Mr. Gardner. Newspapers reported the amazing news. "Fairies in Yorkshire," the headlines declared. An epic-making event. Some people laughed. Others believed the fairies were real. They went to Cottingley to hunt for fairies. They visited Elsie and Frances. They asked the girls to show them where they had taken the photos. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a famous author. He wrote the Sherlock Holmes mystery stories. He believed Elsie and Frances's fairies were real. In 1922, Sir Arthur wrote about Frances and Elsie in a book called The Coming of the Fairies. All over England, people read it. More and more visitors went to Cottingley. The town became famous. People called it Fairyland. Many years went by. In 1981, when Elsie and Frances were old women, they admitted that the fairy photos were a joke. "It was just Elsie and I having a bit of fun," Frances said. "I can't understand to this day why they were taken in." Elsie said the fairies were only paper cutouts mounted on twigs with long sharp hat pins. These fairy hawks happened long ago, but the photos are still famous. Recently, they sold for almost $40,000. People still go to Cottingley to look for fairies in the woods. They still read the fairy tales written by the Brothers Grimm. There are poems and plays about fairies too. Could some of the old fairy stories be true? Will a piece of dry bread protect you from fairy troublemakers? What do you think? Hi, if you like this video, please give this a like and hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to get notified whenever I release a new video.